The notification on my phone read like a death sentence. Motion detected in master bedroom, 2:47 p.m. I was supposed to be boarding my flight to Denver, but instead I sat frozen in the airport parking garage, thumb hovering over the app that would show me what the hidden cameras had recorded while I pretended to leave for my business trip. My name is Marcus Chen, 39 years old, software architect, the kind of man who debugs code for a living and thought he could debug his marriage the same way. I was wrong about everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 weeks earlier, my life looked perfect from the outside. 2-story house in Riverside, California, Tesla in the driveway, a wife who still turned heads at company parties, and a daughter starting her sophomore year at UCLA. But perfection is just another word for denial, and I'd been living in denial for months, maybe years. The signs were there, written in lipstick shades I'd never bought her, in gym memberships she never used, in late nights at the office that smelled like cologne instead of coffee. My wife Jessica had always been beautiful, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make every conversation pause. Auburn hair that caught light like fire, green eyes that used to look at me like I hung the stars. We met in college, both computer science majors, both ambitious, both convinced we were building something that would last forever. 15 years of marriage, 1 daughter, a mortgage, and shared dreams of early retirement. But somewhere between debugging my 1000th software patch and her climbing the corporate ladder at her marketing firm, we'd stopped looking at each other and started looking through each other. The doubts started small. Jessica coming home with stories about new colleagues I'd never heard of, working late on projects that seemed to require an unusual amount of face-to-time meetings. Her phone, once casually left on counters and nightstands, now lived in her purse or pocket, always face down, always just out of reach. When I kissed her goodnight, her lips tasted like secrets. When I tried to hold her close, she felt like she was already somewhere else. I told myself it was normal. 15 years of marriage meant comfort, routine, the natural cooling that comes when passion settles into partnership. But comfort doesn't explain why she started buying new lingerie and never wore it at home. Routine doesn't cover why she suddenly needed to travel to client meetings in cities I'd never heard her mention. And partnership definitely doesn't justify why she flinched when I touched her phone by accident, like I'd reached for something that wasn't mine to touch. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in September. I'd worked late trying to resolve a critical bug in our latest software release, the kind of problem that keeps you staring at code until your eyes burn. When I finally came home at nearly midnight, the house was dark except for the blue glow from Jessica's laptop in our bedroom. She was typing furiously, so focused she didn't hear me climb the stairs. I paused outside the bedroom door, watching her profile in the screen's light, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with. Intense, focused, beautiful in her concentration. Then she started laughing. Not the polite laugh she gave my jokes anymore, but the deep, genuine laughter I remembered from our early days. The sound that used to make my chest tight with happiness, now made my stomach drop. Because as I stepped closer, I could see the video call window on her screen. A man I didn't recognize, dark hair, strong jaw, leaning back in what looked like a hotel room. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and he was saying something that made my wife throw her head back and laugh like she was 22 again. I cleared my throat. Jessica's fingers flew to the laptop screen, slamming it shut so fast I was surprised it didn't break. Her face went white, then red, cycling through expressions like a slot machine before landing on forced casual. "Marcus, you scared me. I thought you were staying late tonight." I was. Bug got fixed faster than expected. I kept my voice neutral, but my heart was Who were you talking to? Client call. West Coast meeting ran long because of the time difference. She was already moving, closing the laptop, sliding it into her bag like she was putting away evidence. You know how these marketing campaigns go. I knew how marketing campaigns went. I also knew that most client calls didn't involve men in hotel rooms making my wife laugh like a teenager, but I didn't say that. Instead I nodded, kissed her forehead, and went to brush my teeth while my mind raced through possibilities I didn't want to consider. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Jessica slept beside me, her breathing steady and peaceful like she had nothing to hide. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face, the way he looked at her through the screen, the way she looked back, like they shared something I wasn't part of, something that belonged to them. The next morning, Jessica was up before me, already dressed in a black suit I'd never seen, checking her phone while coffee brewed. She looked polished, professional, untouchable. When I mentioned the strange call again, she had her story ready. New client in Portland, big campaign launch, lots of late-night coordination calls because of the time zones. Her explanation was smooth, detailed, convincing. Too convincing. That's when I started paying attention to things I'd been ignoring. How her phone buzzed with messages during dinner, but she never checked them in front of me. How she suddenly needed to work weekends on projects that required her to leave the house. How she came home from these work sessions, looking flushed and energized instead of tired. How our conversations had become logistics meetings about schedules and bills and our daughter's college expenses, while the person I used to stay up all night talking to had vanished. I'm a software architect. I solve problems by breaking them down into smaller components, identifying patterns, testing theories. So I started treating my marriage like a debugging session. I paid attention to her schedule, noting discrepancies between what she told me and what her calendar showed. I listened to her phone calls, catching fragments of conversations that didn't match her explanations. I watched her expressions when she thought I wasn't looking, seeing emotions I couldn't decode. The evidence was circumstantial but mounting. New clothes appearing in her closet that she wore to work but never around me. Credit card charges from restaurants I'd never been to, always during her supposed late meetings. Her laptop password changing for the first time in years, claiming it was company security policy. The way she tensed when I walked into a room while she was on her phone, ending calls abruptly with explanations about colleagues being interrupted. But circumstantial evidence wasn't enough. I needed proof, something concrete and undeniable, something that would either confirm my suspicions or prove I was losing my mind. That's when I remembered the business trip. Every quarter, our company sent senior architects to client sites for system reviews and upgrade planning. It usually meant 3 days away, sometimes a week if the client was particularly demanding. My next trip was scheduled for Denver, a routine audit of a financial services firm's security infrastructure. The timing felt perfect, or maybe perfectly terrible. Jessica had been acting stranger than usual, more secretive, more distant. If something was happening, if someone was coming to our house, this trip would be the perfect opportunity. The idea of installing cameras felt like betrayal, even as I researched the options. Hidden surveillance in my own home, spying on my own wife. It went against everything I believed about trust and privacy, and the foundation of men. But so did lying about late-night video calls with strange men. So did coming home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. So did treating our 15-year marriage like a cover story. I spent hours reading reviews, comparing features, trying to find cameras small enough to hide, but good enough to capture clear footage. The irony wasn't lost on me. I designed security systems for a living, helped companies protect their most sensitive data, but I'd never thought about securing my own home, from the person I'd promised to trust with everything. The cameras I chose were smaller than ping-pong balls, wireless, motion-activated, with cloud storage and real-time notifications, professional-grade equipment designed for nanny monitoring and theft prevention, not for husbands who suspected their wives of destroying their lives. I ordered them online, had them delivered to my office, and spent my lunch breaks learning how to set them up. The hardest part was choosing where to place them. Our bedroom felt like the most obvious location, but also the most invasive. The living room would catch conversations but might miss crucial details. The kitchen would show who came and went but wouldn't capture intimate moments. In the end, I decided on 3 cameras, one in the living room, hidden behind a picture frame, one in the kitchen tucked inside a decorative bowl that Jessica never moved, and one in our bedroom, concealed inside the alarm clock on my nightstand. Installing them took longer than expected. Each camera needed to be positioned carefully, tested for optimal angles, connected to the wireless network without leaving digital footprints. Jessica might notice. I felt like a criminal in my own home, violating the space we'd shared for 15 years. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered her laugh during that video call, the way her face lit up for a stranger while going dark around me. The night before my Denver trip, I ran final tests on the system. All 3 cameras were working perfectly, streaming to a secure cloud server I could access from anywhere. Motion detection was enabled, sending real-time alerts to my phone. Battery life was good for at least a week of continuous operation. From a technical standpoint, everything was flawless. From a human standpoint, I was setting up surveillance on the person I'd promised to love and trust forever. Jessica seemed normal that night, maybe even affectionate. She helped me pack, reminding me to take phone chargers, and asking about my return flight. We ordered takeout from the Thai place we used to frequent when we were dating, sitting at our kitchen table making small talk about our daughter's classes and weekend plans. For a moment it felt like old times, like we were still the couple who used to stay up all night talking about code and dreams and the future we were building together. But then her phone buzzed, and I watched her check it with that secretive expression I'd learned to recognize. She typed a quick response, smiled to herself, then looked up at me like nothing had happened. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." I knew how it was. I also knew that work messages at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday didn't usually make people smile like they were sharing inside jokes. But I nodded and finished my pad thai, while my stomach churned with anticipation and dread. That night, we made love for the first time in weeks. Or maybe we just had sex. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. Jessica was present but distant, responsive but not really there. Afterward, she fell asleep quickly while I lay awake calculating time zones and flight schedules, and wondering what the cameras would record while I was gone. My flight to Denver was at 8 a.m., which meant leaving the house by 6 to account for traffic and security lines. Jessica was still sleeping when I kissed her goodbye, her hair spread across the pillow like spilled wine. She murmured something about having a good trip and rolled over, already drifting back to dreams I wasn't part of. The drive to LAX felt like driving to my own execution. Every mile took me further from home, and closer to answers I wasn't sure I wanted. The cameras were running, motion detection active, notifications enabled. By the time I boarded the plane, my phone was already buzzing with alerts as Jessica moved through our morning routine. Getting coffee, checking her phone, preparing for another day of secrets I was no longer around to witness. The flight to Denver took 2 hours. I spent most of it staring out the window at clouds that looked like cotton, and cities that looked like circuit boards, trying not to check my phone every 5 minutes for camera alerts. The business part of my brain knew that constant monitoring would drain the battery and miss important footage. The husband part of my brain couldn't stop refreshing the app, watching brief clips of Jessica getting dressed, eating breakfast, leaving for work. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious, just my wife going through her normal routine while I sat 30,000 feet above the ground, feeling like the worst kind of paranoid husband. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the late nights and secret calls and new clothes were exactly what she said they were. Maybe I was destroying my marriage over nothing more than jealousy and insecurity. That hope lasted until 2:47 p.m. Mountain Time, when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the bedroom camera. I was sitting in the hotel lobby in Denver, reviewing technical specifications for the client meeting, when the notification lit up my screen. Motion detected in master bedroom. For a moment, I thought it might be our cat, or maybe Jessica had come home early from work. But we didn't have a cat, and Jessica never came home before 6 on weekdays.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
My finger trembled as I opened the camera app. The bedroom came into view, our familiar space rendered in the cold digital clarity of surveillance footage. At first I didn't see anything unusual. Our bed was made, the curtains drawn, everything exactly as I'd left it that morning. Then the motion that triggered the alert stepped into frame. Jessica. But not the Jessica who'd kissed me goodbye that morning. This version wore a red dress I'd never seen, her hair loose and flowing instead of pulled back in her usual work style. She moved with purpose, checking her reflection in the mirror, smoothing the fabric over her curves. She looked beautiful. She looked like she was preparing for something important. Someone important. The camera captured her checking her phone, typing a message, smiling at the response. Then she disappeared from view, moving toward the living room. I switched to that camera, watching as she walked through our house, like she was setting a stage. Dimming lights, adjusting pillows on the couch, checking her appearance one more time in the hallway mirror. At 3:15 p.m., the doorbell rang. Jessica moved to answer it with the kind of eager anticipation I hadn't seen in years. When she opened the door, my world collapsed in high-definition clarity. The man from the video call stepped into our house, into our living room, into the life I thought belonged to me. He was taller than I expected, well-dressed in a way that suggested money and confidence. When Jessica closed the door behind him, she didn't step back to maintain polite distance. She stepped into his arms. They kissed like lovers. Not the polite greeting between colleagues or friends, but the desperate, hungry kiss of two people who'd been waiting all day to touch each other. His hands tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck, and for 30 seconds that felt like 30 years, I watched my wife kiss another man in our living room, while I sat in a hotel lobby 2,000 miles away. When they finally broke apart, Jessica took his hand and led him toward the stairs, toward our bedroom, toward the bed where I'd kissed her goodbye 12 hours earlier. I closed the app before I could see any more. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Around me the hotel lobby buzzed with normal life. Business travelers checking in, families planning vacation activities, the ordinary rhythm of people living ordinary lives, none of them knowing that mine had just ended. The client meeting was supposed to start in an hour. I was supposed to review their security infrastructure, identify vulnerabilities, recommend solutions. Instead, I sat frozen in a leather chair, staring at a phone that contained video evidence of my marriage's destruction. The cameras were still recording. The motion alerts kept coming. Every notification was another nail in the coffin of everything I thought I knew. I didn't watch the rest. I couldn't, but the alerts kept coming throughout the afternoon. Motion in the bedroom, motion in the living room, motion in the kitchen, a timeline of betrayal playing out in real time while I sat powerless to stop it. The man who'd stepped into my house wasn't just visiting. He was inhabiting my life, touching my wife, claiming space in my home like he belonged there. By the time the alerts stopped, it was nearly 6 p.m. I'd missed the client meeting entirely, sitting in the lobby like a statue while my professional reputation crumbled along with my personal life. My phone showed dozens of missed calls from my manager, text messages asking where I was, emails demanding explanations I couldn't give. How do you explain that you've just watched your wife destroy your marriage in real time? How do you tell your boss that you missed the most important client meeting of the quarter because you were busy watching hidden camera footage of your spouse committing adultery in your own bedroom? The final alert came at 6:23 p.m. Motion detected in living room. I opened the app with numb fingers, watching as Jessica walked the man to our front door. They kissed goodbye the same way they'd kissed hello, with passion that made my chest ache. After he left, Jessica stood in the doorway for a long moment, touching her lips like she was trying to preserve the feeling of his kiss. Then she closed the door, walked back through our house, and began erasing evidence of his visit, straightening pillows, adjusting lights, changing back into work clothes. By the time she was finished, our home looked exactly as it had that morning. Except now I knew it was a stage set, a carefully maintained facade hiding the truth of what happened when I wasn't there to see it. I sat in that hotel lobby until nearly midnight, staring at my phone, replaying those few seconds of footage over and over. Jessica kissing a stranger, Jessica leading him upstairs, Jessica living a completely different life the moment I stepped out of it. The woman I'd been married to for 15 years, the mother of my daughter, the person I trusted with every secret and dream and fear, had just revealed herself to be someone I didn't know at all. The business trip to Denver lasted 3 more days. I went through the motions, attended rescheduled meetings, reviewed security protocols, wrote reports that would probably never be read, but my mind stayed in that bedroom camera, watching the loop of my wife's betrayal until it burned itself into my memory like a brand. The cameras kept recording. Every day brought new alerts, new evidence, new proof that Jessica's affair wasn't a moment of weakness or a single mistake. It was a relationship, a routine, a carefully orchestrated deception that required planning and coordination and the kind of effort she'd stopped putting into our marriage years ago. On my second day in Denver, I watched footage of them having coffee in our kitchen, sitting at the table where Jessica and I ate breakfast every morning. They talked and laughed like old friends, comfortable in a way that suggested this wasn't their second meeting. It was probably their 20th or 50th. How long had this been going on? How many business trips had provided cover for their affair? How many late nights at the office had actually been spent in hotel rooms or his apartment, or our own house? The third day, I didn't even pretend to focus on work. I spent the morning researching divorce attorneys, reading about California's community property laws, learning about custody arrangements and asset division. In the afternoon, I called 3 law firms, scheduling consultations for the week after my return. By evening, I'd started documenting everything: screenshots from the camera footage, financial records, credit card statements, anything that might be relevant in divorce proceedings. The cameras had given me exactly what I'd hoped for: undeniable proof of Jessica's infidelity, clear evidence that would protect me in court, ensure I kept custody of our daughter, maybe even help me recover some dignity in the aftermath. But proof came with a price. I couldn't unknow what I'd learned. I couldn't unsee what I'd witnessed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jessica in that red dress, moving through our house, like she was preparing for a date, while I flew to Denver believing she was just another lonely spouse missing her traveling husband. The flight home felt longer than the flight out. I'd left Los Angeles as a suspicious husband, harboring doubts about his marriage. I was returning as a man who'd watched his wife destroy everything they'd built together. The cameras were still recording, sending alerts to my phone like digital heartbeats. Motion in the bedroom, motion in the living room, evidence accumulating in cloud storage that would soon be downloaded by divorce attorneys and analyzed by private investigators. Jessica picked me up at LAX, smiling and asking about the trip like nothing had changed. She looked beautiful, dressed in the same style that had once made my heart race. Now it just made me sick, because I knew this version of Jessica was a performance, carefully calibrated to maintain the illusion of a happy marriage, while hiding the truth of what she did when I wasn't there to see it. "How was Denver?" she asked as we drove home through Friday evening traffic. "Productive," I said, which was true in ways she'd never understand. "How were things here?" "Quiet. Boring. I missed you." The lies came so easily I wondered how long she'd been practicing them. "I missed you," she said, while camera footage showed her kissing another man in our living room. "Quiet and boring," she claimed, while motion alerts documented hours of activity that had nothing to do with loneliness or fidelity. We drove through familiar neighborhoods toward our house, past the coffee shops and restaurants and parks that had formed the backdrop of our 15-year marriage. Everything looked the same, but I felt like an alien visiting a planet I'd once called home. The cameras had changed everything, revealing not just Jessica's betrayal, but the complete fiction of the life I thought we were living together. That night we had dinner at our kitchen table, the same table where I'd watched her drink coffee with her lover 2 days earlier. Jessica talked about work projects and weekend plans while I nodded and responded and played the role of the unsuspecting husband. But inside I was calculating, planning, preparing for the conversation that would end our marriage and the legal battle that would determine our daughter's future. The cameras were still recording, hidden in plain sight, continuing to document evidence that would soon be used against the woman sitting across from me. Jessica had no idea she was under surveillance, no clue that every move she made was being captured and stored and prepared for presentation in divorce court. The technology I'd installed to uncover the truth would soon become the weapon that destroyed her. But as I sat there watching my wife of 15 years eat pasta and talk about weekend plans, I realized something that chilled me more than her betrayal. I felt nothing. No anger, no heartbreak, no sense of loss, just cold calculation and strategic planning. The cameras hadn't just revealed Jessica's secret life, they'd revealed mine, and the man staring back at me through those hidden lenses. Someone I wasn't sure I wanted to meet. The attorney's office smelled like leather and broken promises. Sandra Walsh sat across from me in a conference room that probably cost more per hour than most people made in a week, reviewing the printed screenshots and video files I'd brought. Her expression remained professionally neutral as she examined each piece of evidence, but I caught the slight raise of her eyebrows when she saw the bedroom footage. "This is comprehensive documentation," she said, closing the folder. "Time-stamped, high resolution, multiple angles. In California, this constitutes clear evidence of adultery, which can influence property division and custody arrangements." I nodded, trying to ignore the way my stomach churned every time someone else looked at those images. "What's our next step?" "First, we need to identify the other party." Do you know who this man is? Not yet, but I have ways of finding out. Sandra leaned back in her chair, studying me with the kind of professional assessment that made me feel like I was being debugged. Marcus, I need to ask this directly. How did you obtain this footage? Security cameras in my own home, perfectly legal. Were they installed with your wife's knowledge or consent? The question hung in the air like smoke. I'd known it was coming, had prepared my answer, but actually saying it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. No, she wasn't aware of the surveillance. That complicates things. California has strict privacy laws, even between spouses. We can use this evidence, but we need to be careful about how we present it. She made notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen scratching against the silence. I also have to advise you that revealing this footage could escalate the situation unpredictably. Once your wife knows about the cameras, there's no going back. I thought about Jessica, sitting at our kitchen table the night before, asking about my day while I calculated the cost of hiring private investigators to identify her lover. Going back wasn't an option anymore. It had stopped being an option the moment I watched her kiss another man in our living room. I understand. What do you need from me? More information about the other party, name, address, employment, marital status. The more we know, the stronger our position becomes. She slid a business card across the table. I'm recommending you work with this private investigator. He specializes in infidelity cases and has experience with the kind of evidence you've collected. The card read James Morrison Private Investigations, followed by a phone number and an address in downtown Los Angeles. How long will this take? That depends on how cooperative your wife becomes once we file papers. With this evidence, she'll have very little negotiating power, especially if the other party is married or has a professional reputation to protect. Sandra's smile was sharp as a blade. Some people prefer quiet settlements to public scandals. I left the attorney's office with a retainer agreement and a timeline that stretched 6 months into the future. 6 months of depositions and discovery and negotiations while I continued living with a woman who thought she was still keeping secrets. The cameras were still running, still recording, still sending alerts to my phone every time Jessica moved through our house. The surveillance had become an addiction, a constant stream of information I couldn't stop consuming even though every alert felt like drinking poison. James Morrison's office occupied the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades. The elevator wheezed between floors and the hallway smelled like old coffee and older secrets. Morrison himself looked exactly like I'd expected a private investigator to look. Mid-50s, gray stubble, eyes that had seen too much and believed too little. Software architect, he said, reviewing my file. You boys always come prepared. Most guys show up here with nothing but suspicions and credit card receipts. I handed him a USB drive containing the camera footage. How long to identify him? Depends on how careful he's been. Face recognition software, reverse image searches, social media cross-referencing. If he exists in the digital world, I'll find him. Morrison plugged the drive into his computer, his expression unchanging as the bedroom footage played across his monitor. Professional quality surveillance. You do this kind of work before? No, just thorough. Thorough doesn't cover it. This is obsessive-level documentation. He paused the video on a clear shot of the man's face. But obsession gets results. Give me 48 hours. I spent those 48 hours in a strange state of suspended animation, going to work, attending meetings, writing code, pretending to be the same person I'd been before the cameras revealed the truth. But every conversation felt scripted, every interaction hollow. My colleagues talked about weekend plans and project deadlines while I nodded and responded appropriately, all while calculating the timeline of my marriage's destruction. Jessica seemed different too, though I couldn't tell if it was real or projection. She was more attentive, asking about my day, suggesting we plan a vacation for our upcoming anniversary. The irony was suffocating. She was trying to reconnect with me while simultaneously betraying everything we'd built together. Or maybe the guilt was finally catching up with her. Maybe watching me come and go from business trips while she entertained other men in our bed was wearing down whatever justification she'd constructed for her behavior. The camera alerts continued. Motion in the living room during lunch breaks when Jessica should have been at work. Motion in the bedroom on Thursday afternoon when she claimed to be in client meetings. Motion in the kitchen at hours that suggested someone was cooking dinner for two while I worked late at the office, believing my wife was home alone missing me. Morrison called exactly 48 hours after I'd hired him. Got him. Dr. Ryan Blackwood, cardiologist at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, 42 years old, divorced 6 months ago, owns a condo in Beverly Hills. Your wife's been busy. The name hit me like a physical blow. Dr. Ryan Blackwood. I'd heard Jessica mention him before, always in passing, always in the context of her marketing firm's healthcare clients. A professional connection that had apparently become much more personal. What else? Clean record, no criminal history, but there's something interesting. His divorce was finalized in March, citing irreconcilable differences, but I dug deeper. His ex-wife filed the original papers last September, claiming adultery. She withdrew the accusation as part of the settlement, but the timing suspicious. September, right around the time Jessica started working late, taking more client calls, buying new clothes. You think he left his wife for mine, or your wife helped him destroy his marriage the same way she's destroying yours. Either way, this guy's got a pattern, and patterns make people predictable. Morrison emailed me a comprehensive dossier on Dr. Ryan Blackwood, medical degree from UCLA, residency at Johns Hopkins, board certification in cardiology, professional headshots that showed the same face I'd watched kiss my wife in our living room, home address, office location, parking garage access codes, daily schedule mapped down to his lunch breaks and hospital rounds. What's the plan? Morrison asked when I called him back after reviewing the file. I need to meet him. That's not usually how these things work. Most guys prefer to let the lawyers handle contact. I'm not most guys. The silence stretched across the phone line before Morrison spoke again. You want my advice? Don't do anything that could compromise your divorce case. Don't give him or your wife ammunition to use against you. What if I just want to talk? Men who install hidden cameras to catch their wives cheating don't usually just want to talk. They want blood. Morrison's voice carried the weight of experience. I've seen this story before, Marcus. It doesn't end well when husbands confront the other guy. But I wasn't interested in Morrison's experience or his warnings. I was interested in looking Ryan Blackwood in the eyes and understanding how a man justifies destroying another man's family. I wanted to know if he thought about me when he kissed my wife, if he considered our 15-year marriage and our daughter's stability before he decided to claim what wasn't his. The research took me 3 days. Hospital schedules, parking patterns, coffee shop preferences. Ryan Blackwood was a creature of habit, which made him easy to track. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he stopped at a Starbucks near the hospital between his morning rounds and afternoon surgeries. Always the same time, always the same order, always sitting at the corner table where he could work on his laptop while drinking overpriced coffee. I arrived 20 minutes early, claiming a table with clear sightlines to the entrance. When Blackwood walked in at exactly 10:30 a.m., my chest tightened with recognition. He looked smaller in person, less imposing than he'd appeared in the camera footage. Just a man in surgical scrubs grabbing coffee between patients, completely unaware that the husband of his lover was watching him from across the room. He ordered his usual Grande Americano and claimed his regular table, opening a laptop and pulling up what looked like patient files. For 10 minutes I studied him like a specimen under a microscope. The way he held his coffee cup, the way he typed with 2 fingers, the way he checked his phone every few minutes. This was the man who'd been sleeping with my wife, touching her body, making her laugh in ways I hadn't heard in years. When I finally approached his table, Blackwood looked up with the polite confusion of someone who didn't recognize the face but sensed trouble approaching. Dr. Blackwood, I'm Marcus Chen. I think we need to talk. His expression shifted through several emotions before settling on wary recognition. He knew my name. Jessica had talked about me. I'm sorry, do we know each other? You know my wife, Jessica Chen, marketing executive, auburn hair, green eyes, married to the guy who's been traveling for work while you've been fucking her in our bedroom. The color drained from Blackwood's face. He glanced around the coffee shop, checking to see if anyone had overheard, then looked back at me with the careful composure of someone accustomed to delivering bad news to patients' families. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I have video footage of you kissing my wife in our living room, leading her upstairs to our bedroom, having coffee at our kitchen table. High definition, Time-stamped crystal-clear documentation of you destroying my family. Blackwood closed his laptop, his hands trembling slightly. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. We're discussing it now. I want to know how long you've been sleeping with her. I don't think that's appropriate. Appropriate. My voice rose loud enough to draw stares from nearby tables. You want to talk about appropriate? Is it appropriate to seduce another man's wife? Is it appropriate to meet her in the house I pay for while I'm working to support the family you're helping her destroy? Please keep your voice down, or what? You'll call security, file a complaint, tell them how the mean husband confronted you about fucking his wife. Blackwood stood abruptly, gathering his laptop and coffee cup. I'm not going to discuss my personal life with you. Your personal life. I stepped closer, close enough to smell his cologne, the same scent I'd noticed on Jessica's clothes. My wife is not your personal life. My marriage is not your personal life. My family is not your personal life. I understand you're upset, but threatening me won't solve anything. Who's threatening you? I'm just asking questions, like how does a cardiologist justify breaking up families? Do they cover that in medical school? The ethics of destroying marriages while you're supposedly saving lives. Blackwood's composure cracked slightly. Your marriage was already broken. Jessica told me you haven't been happy for years. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Jessica had discussed our marriage with him, shared intimate details about our problems, painted me as the villain in her story to justify her betrayal. She told you that. She said you'd grown apart, that you barely talked anymore, barely touched each other, that she felt like she was living with a roommate instead of a husband. Each word was a knife, twisting deeper, because some of it was true. We had grown apart. We did talk less, touch less, connect less than we used to, but growing apart wasn't the same as giving up. It wasn't permission to find someone else, to lie and sneak, and betray everything we'd promised each other. So you decided to help her fix that by sleeping with her. I decided to be there for someone who needed compassion and understanding. Compassion and understanding. Is that what you call it, when you take off her clothes in my bedroom? Blackwood flinched. I think this conversation is over. It's over when I say it's over. You think you can just walk away? Pretend this didn't happen. I have footage of everything, doctor. Every kiss, every touch, every time you've been in my house. My attorney has copies. My private investigator has copies. And if you don't stay away from my wife, everyone at your hospital is going to have copies too. The threat landed exactly as intended. Blackwood's face went white, his grip tightening on his coffee cup until I thought it might shatter. You wouldn't. Try me. See how compassionate and understanding your colleagues are when they find out you're sleeping with married women. See how your patients feel about trusting their hearts to a man who specializes in breaking them. That's blackmail. That's consequences. You made choices, doctor. Now you get to live with them. I walked out of the Starbucks feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The confrontation hadn't solved anything, hadn't done the damage or restored my marriage, but it had restored something else. Power. For months, I'd felt powerless, watching my wife drift away while I scrambled to understand what was happening. Now I had information, evidence, leverage, tools to fight back. The cameras showed Blackwood calling someone the moment I left the coffee shop. 20 minutes later, Jessica's phone started ringing. I watched through the office camera as she stepped outside to take the call, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk while talking animatedly. Whatever Blackwood told her, it wasn't good news. That evening, Jessica came home early. She found me in my office, allegedly working on code but actually reviewing camera footage from earlier in the day. Her expression was carefully controlled, but I could see the fear underneath. How was your day? She asked, leaning against the doorframe with forced casualness. Productive. Yours? Fine. Normal. Nothing exciting. I nodded, saving my work and closing the laptop. That's good. Boring days are underrated. She lingered in the doorway, clearly wanting to say something but not knowing how to start. Finally, she managed. Marcus, if something was bothering you, you'd talk to me about it, right? We don't keep secrets from each other. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Jessica asking about secrets while standing in a house riddled with hidden cameras, having just finished a panic call with her lover about her husband discovering their affair. Of course, we tell each other everything. Good. That's good. I just want to make sure we're communicating. Communication is important in a marriage. She nodded, still hovering, still searching for something in my expression that would tell her how much I knew. I love you, Marcus. I know things have been difficult lately, but I love you. I love you too. I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. After Jessica went to bed, I called Morrison. Blackwood contacted her. I confronted him this morning, and now they're both scared. Scared people do unpredictable things. You need to be careful. What's the worst that could happen? They already destroyed my marriage. The worst that could happen is they get smarter about hiding it, or they decide you're a threat that needs to be dealt with, or your wife figures out about the cameras and destroys your evidence before you can use it in court. Morrison was right, but I was past caring about worst-case scenarios. I'd spent months being careful, being patient, being the understanding husband while Jessica lied to my face and destroyed our family. Careful hadn't protected me. Patient hadn't saved my marriage. Understanding had only made me a better victim. The next few days passed in a strange state of detente. Jessica was home more often, attentive in ways she hadn't been for months. She cooked dinner, asked about my projects, suggested we watch movies together on the couch. To an outside observer, we looked like a couple working through their problems, reconnecting after a rough patch, but the cameras told a different story. Jessica's phone calls were longer, more frequent, more secretive. She would step outside to take them, drive to the grocery store for conversations that lasted longer than any shopping trip, disappear into the bathroom with her phone, and emerge 20 minutes later looking stressed. On Thursday, motion alerts started coming from locations outside our house. Jessica was meeting someone during her lunch breaks, spending extended time in parking garages and restaurant bathrooms, and her car in empty lots. The affair had gone underground, become more sophisticated, more careful, but it hadn't ended. That night, Jessica suggested we go out to dinner. Like old times, she said. Remember when we used to try new restaurants every Friday night? I remembered. I also remembered when Friday nights meant coming home to my wife, instead of worrying about what she was doing while I wasn't there to watch. But I agreed, partly because maintaining the illusion was necessary for my legal strategy, and partly because I was curious about what Jessica was planning. We drove to a small Italian place in Santa Monica, the kind of intimate spot we'd favored when we were dating. Jessica looked beautiful in the candlelight, wearing a black dress that hugged her curves in ways that once would have made me forget about everything else. Now it just reminded me that she'd been dressing up for someone else, saving her best clothes and brightest smiles for a man who wasn't her husband. "This is nice," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "We should do this more often. We should. I've missed this." "Missed what?" "Us. The way we used to be." Her eyes glistened with what looked like genuine emotion. "We can be that way again, Marcus. It doesn't have to be like it's been." "What's been wrong with the way it's been?" Jessica hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "We've been distant, both of us. Focused on work, on routines, on everything except each other, but that doesn't mean we can't fix it." "How do we fix something we don't understand?" "We start by being honest about what we need, what we want from each other." The conversation felt like dancing on a minefield. Every word carried the weight of secrets neither of us was acknowledging. Jessica was testing me, trying to determine how much I knew while positioning herself as the wife who wanted to save our marriage. I was gathering information, documenting her lies, while playing the role of the husband who still believed in us. "What do you need?" I asked. "I need to feel connected to you again. I need to feel like we're partners, not just two people sharing a house and a bank account." "And what does that look like?" "More conversations like this, more time together, less work, less distraction, more focus on us." It sounded reasonable. It sounded like the kind of marriage counseling advice you'd find in self-help books. It also sounded like someone who was trying to end an affair without admitting it had ever started. "I'd like that," I said, squeezing her hand. "I want us to work." The relief in her eyes was unmistakable. She thought she'd managed the crisis, convinced me that our marriage problems were just the normal wear and tear of long-term relationships. She thought Dr. Ryan Blackwood had been a secret she could bury, a mistake she could erase, by being a better wife. But the cameras were still recording, the evidence was still accumulating, and the attorney was still preparing papers that would turn Jessica's careful fiction into public record. We drove home holding hands, talking about vacation plans, and home improvement projects, and all the normal concerns of a couple planning their future together. Jessica seemed lighter, more relaxed than she'd been in weeks. The guilt that had been eating at her was finally easing, replaced by the belief that she'd successfully navigated the most dangerous moment of her affair. That night, we made love for the first time since I'd returned from Denver. It was gentle, almost tentative, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. Jessica moved beneath me with the kind of desperate intensity that felt like penance, like she was trying to atone for sins I wasn't supposed to know about. Afterward, she fell asleep in my arms, her breathing deep and peaceful. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her body against mine, and thinking about the man who'd been touching her in this same bed just days earlier. The man who'd been making her laugh, and moan and arch her back in ways I hadn't inspired in years. The irony was suffocating. Jessica was sleeping peacefully, believing she'd saved our marriage, while I planned its destruction. She was dreaming of second chances while I calculated revenge. We were closer than we'd been in months, sharing the same bed and the same lies, while hidden cameras documented everything for attorneys who would soon be tearing us apart. My phone buzzed with a motion alert from the living room camera. For a moment, I tensed, thinking someone had broken into the house. Then I realized it was just our cat, moving through the room in the pre-dawn darkness. A false alarm in a life that had become nothing but alarms, real and imagined, warning me about dangers I was already planning to destroy. Jessica stirred beside me, mumbling something in her sleep about being late for a meeting.
Even unconscious, she was thinking about work, about schedules, about the careful coordination required to maintain her double life, but her careful coordination was about to become evidence in proceedings that would strip away every secret she'd worked so hard to protect. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new motion alerts, new evidence, new steps toward the legal destruction of everything we'd built together. The cameras would keep recording, the attorneys would keep planning, and Jessica would keep believing she'd managed to save our marriage while I systematically destroyed it. The war had moved beyond discovery into strategy, and unlike Jessica, I wasn't fighting to save what we'd had. I was fighting to make sure she lost everything she'd thrown away. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I watched from my office window as Jessica signed for the envelope, her hands trembling as she recognized the law firm's letterhead. The cameras captured everything, her face draining of color as she read the first page, her legs giving out as she sank onto our living room couch, the way she covered her mouth with both hands, as if she could somehow hold back the scream building in her chest. By the time I arrived home that evening, the house felt like a crime scene. Jessica was sitting at our kitchen table, the papers spread in front of her like evidence of her own execution. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes red and swollen from hours of crying. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I loosened my tie, hanging it on the chair like this was just another ordinary evening. "Known what? Don't play games with me, Marcus. How long have you known about Ryan?" The use of his first name hit like a slap. Not Dr. Blackwood, not the man, but Ryan. Like he was someone important, someone who mattered more than the husband she'd been lying to for months. "Long enough," I said, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a beer. "Long enough to document everything." "Document?" Her voice cracked on the word. "What do you mean, document?" I took a long drink, savoring the moment. She was finally asking the right questions, finally facing the consequences of choices she'd thought would remain hidden forever. "Hidden cameras, Jessica, professional grade, motion activated, cloud storage. I have footage of everything." The color that had started to return to her face disappeared completely. "You were spying on me. I was protecting myself. Turns out I needed to." She stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back, her hands shaking. "This is insane. You can't just surveil your own wife." "Actually, I can. In my own house, with my own equipment. It's perfectly legal." My attorney confirmed it. "Your attorney?" She spun around, eyes wide with panic. "How many people have seen these recordings?" "Everyone who needs to see them. Lawyers, investigators, court officials. They're all very impressed with the quality. High definition really captures the details."
Jessica grabbed the edge of the table for support, swaying like she might collapse. Oh God, Marcus, you don't understand. This will destroy everything. Everything was already destroyed. I just documented the wreckage. Please. Tears streamed down her face, mascara leaving dark tracks on her cheeks. Please, we can work this out. Marriage counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Just don't make this public. Public? I smiled, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. It's already public. Court filings are public record. Your lover's hospital will be very interested in their physician's extracurricular activities. You sent the footage to his work. Not yet, but it's queued up, ready to send. Depends on how cooperative you are during the divorce proceedings. She collapsed back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. You're destroying his life too. He doesn't deserve this. He doesn't deserve this. My voice rose, the first real emotion I'd shown since walking into the house. What about what I didn't deserve? What about 15 years of marriage that apparently meant nothing to you? It meant everything to me. Then why did you throw it away for a cardiologist with a God complex? It wasn't supposed to happen. It just developed, like a rash, or a tumor. Something that just appeared without any choices or decisions on your part. She looked up at me with desperate eyes. Marcus, please. I know I made mistakes, but destroying Ryan's career won't fix our marriage. Our marriage is over, has been since the first time you brought him into our bed. This isn't about fixing anything. This is about consequences. The word hung between us like a blade. Jessica had spent months believing her affair could exist in a bubble, separate from the rest of her life. She'd compartmentalized her betrayal, convinced herself that what I didn't know couldn't hurt me. But compartments have walls, and walls eventually fall down. What do you want? She whispered. I want you to understand what you've lost. I want you to feel what I felt watching footage of my wife, with another man in our bedroom. I want you to know that choices have prices, and you're about to pay yours. She sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the divorce papers like they might spontaneously combust and solve her problems. Finally she spoke without looking up. What about Emma? Our daughter doesn't deserve to be destroyed by this. Emma will be fine. She'll live with me, in a house where people tell the truth. You can't take her away from me. I can and I will. Courts tend to favor parents who don't commit adultery, and then lie about it for months. Marcus, please, I'm begging you. Don't do this to our family. I didn't do this to our family. You did. I just made sure there was evidence. That night, Jessica moved into the guest bedroom, not because I asked her to, but because she couldn't stand sleeping in the bed where the cameras had recorded her betrayal. She lay awake most of the night, crying or making phone calls or pacing the hallway like a caged animal. The motion alerts never stopped coming. By morning she'd called in sick to work and hired her own attorney. By afternoon, she'd driven to Ryan's condo for a meeting that lasted 3 hours. The cameras in our house captured her return, showing a woman who looked 10 years older than she had the day before. He's ending it, she said when I found her sitting in our living room, staring at nothing. Ryan says it's too risky now. His reputation, his practice, his future. He can't afford to be associated with a scandal. Smart man. Shame he wasn't that smart 6 months ago. He never loved me anyway. I was just convenient. The defeat in her voice should have stirred some sympathy, some memory of the woman I'd once loved enough to marry. Instead it felt like justice. Jessica was finally understanding what I'd felt watching those first camera recordings. The realization that someone you trusted had been using you, lying to you, treating your emotions like disposable commodities. Is that supposed to make me feel sorry for you? No, I just thought you should know that I lost him too. Whatever you think I gained from this affair, it's gone. Ryan made it very clear that I was a mistake he regrets. At least you got to make that mistake. I just got to live with the consequences. The legal proceedings moved faster than I'd expected. Jessica's attorney tried to fight the surveillance evidence, claiming invasion of privacy and demanding the footage be thrown out. But California law was clear about recording in one's own home, and the recordings were admissible. More damaging than admissible, they were compelling. The judge who reviewed the evidence didn't bother hiding his disgust. Multiple affairs documented over months, clear evidence of deception and betrayal, financial records showing money spent on hotel rooms and gifts while claiming business expenses. Jessica's credibility was destroyed before she ever had a chance to defend herself. This is one of the most comprehensive cases of documented adultery I've seen in 20 years on the bench, Judge Harrison said during a preliminary hearing. Mrs. Chen, I'm going to be very frank with you. Your husband has video evidence of behavior that makes you an unsuitable candidate for primary custody and potentially liable for significant financial penalties. Jessica's lawyer whispered frantically in her ear, but I could see the defeat in her posture. She'd walked into court believing she could negotiate, charm her way to a reasonable settlement. Instead, she was facing public humiliation and the loss of everything she'd taken for granted. The custody evaluation was scheduled for the following week. A court-appointed psychologist would interview both of us, review the evidence, and make recommendations about Emma's living arrangements. I'd already prepared my testimony, documenting Jessica's lies, her absence during critical periods of our daughter's development, her willingness to risk our family's stability for an affair with a married man. You're going to destroy Emma's relationship with her mother, Jessica said after the hearing, confronting me in the courthouse parking garage. Is that really what you want? I want Emma to grow up understanding that actions have consequences, that promises mean something, that marriage isn't just a convenience you discard when someone more exciting comes along. She's 19 years old, Marcus. She's not a child who needs protection from adult realities. Then she's old enough to understand why her mother chose to betray her family. Jessica's face crumpled. I never chose this. It happened gradually, without planning. Ryan and I connected professionally, then personally, then emotionally. By the time I realized how far it had gone, I was in too deep to stop. You could have stopped any time, you could have told the truth any time, you chose not to. Because I knew you'd react like this. I knew you'd use it to destroy me. I'm not destroying you, Jessica, I'm revealing you. There's a difference. The conversation that would change everything came 3 days later. Emma called while I was reviewing financial documents for the property division hearing, her voice tight with anger. I'd rarely heard. Dad, what the hell is happening? Mom called me crying, saying you're trying to take everything from her. I set down my pen, choosing my words carefully. I'm protecting myself in the divorce proceedings. Your mother made choices that ended our marriage. What choices? She said something about surveillance footage. About you spying on her. That's insane, Dad. That's not the kind of person you are. What kind of person am I, Emma? You're the guy who taught me to change my oil and helped me with calculus homework and drove 4 hours to bring me soup when I had the flu freshman year. You're not the kind of person who puts hidden cameras in his own house. Her words hit harder than any of Jessica's tears or pleading. Emma saw me as the father she'd grown up with, stable and trustworthy and predictable. She couldn't reconcile that image with the man who'd systematically documented his wife's betrayal and was now using it to destroy her in court. Sometimes people become different versions of themselves when they're hurt, I said. Hurt by what? Mom won't tell me anything specific, just that you've lost your mind and you're trying to punish her for something. The something. Jessica hadn't told our daughter about the affair, about Ryan Blackwood, about the months of lies and deception. She'd positioned herself as the victim of an unstable husband who'd inexplicably turned vindictive. Your mother had an affair, Emma. Multiple affairs. I have documented evidence of her bringing other men into our house, into our bedroom, while I was traveling for work. Silence stretched across the phone line. When Emma finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. That's not true. I wish it wasn't. I have video footage, hotel receipts, months of evidence. She's been lying to both of us. Show me. What? If you really have proof, show me. I'm driving down this weekend. Show me this evidence you keep talking about. The thought of my daughter watching footage of her mother's betrayal made my stomach turn. But Emma was an adult, old enough to understand the truth, old enough to make her own decisions about the people in her life. Are you sure you want to see it? I'm sure I want to know the truth. Emma arrived on Saturday morning, her face set in the kind of determined expression she'd inherited from her mother. She looked older than 19, carrying herself with the weight of someone who'd been forced to grow up too quickly. We sat in my office while I pulled up selected clips from the camera footage, choosing the least intimate moments that still clearly showed Jessica's affair. Emma watched in silence as her mother kissed Ryan Blackwood in our living room, led him upstairs, served him coffee at our kitchen table. Her expression never changed, but I could see her hands trembling as the evidence accumulated. How long? She asked when I paused the footage. 6 months that I can prove, Probably longer. And you never said anything. I wanted to be sure. I wanted evidence that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. Emma stared at the frozen image on my computer screen, her mother's face caught mid-laugh as she flirted with a man who wasn't her husband. She's been lying to me too. All those times I called and she was working late or in meetings. She was with him. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'm not. Emma's voice was flat, emotionless. I'm glad you documented it. I'm glad you have proof. Because if you just told me without evidence, I never would have believed it. She left that afternoon without saying goodbye to Jessica, driving back to UCLA with a new understanding of the family she'd grown up in. That evening Jessica called me in tears. What did you show her? Emma won't answer my calls, won't respond to my texts. What did you do? I showed her the truth, the same truth that's going to be presented in court. She's my daughter too, Marcus. You can't turn her against me. I didn't turn her against you. Your choices did that. The final court hearing took place 3 weeks later in a sterile room that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Jessica sat with her attorney, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, while I presented evidence that would determine the rest of our lives. The financial settlement was harsh but fair. Jessica kept her car and her retirement, but the house, the savings, and most of our shared assets went to me. The judge cited her adultery and deception as factors in the division, noting that her behavior had caused measurable financial harm to the marriage. Custody was even more decisive. Emma was legally an adult, free to choose her own living arrangements, but the judge made his opinion clear. Mrs. Chen, your documented pattern of deception and your willingness to bring multiple extramarital partners into the family home demonstrates poor judgment that would negatively impact any minor children. In this case, your daughter is old enough to make her own choices, but I would strongly recommend family counseling to address the trust issues your behavior has created. Jessica signed the papers with shaking hands, officially ending 15 years of marriage with her signature on legal documents that would follow her forever. She'd walked into the courthouse that morning as my wife. She left as my ex-wife, with limited financial resources and a daughter who no longer trusted her. I hope you're satisfied, she said as we left the building for the last time as a married couple. I'm complete, I replied. There's a difference. 6 months later, Emma graduated from UCLA with a degree in computer science, following in her father's footsteps. She'd maintained minimal contact with Jessica, agreeing to coffee meetings every few weeks but keeping conversations surface level and brief. The easy intimacy they'd once shared was gone, replaced by polite distance and careful boundaries. Do you ever regret it? Emma asked me after her graduation ceremony. We were sitting in a restaurant near campus, celebrating her achievement and her job offer from a tech company in San Francisco. Regret what? The cameras, the evidence, destroying Mom's life so completely. I considered the question while watching families at nearby tables, parents and children celebrating milestones together, sharing joy that felt uncomplicated and genuine. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that your mother made choices that required me to gather evidence against her. But I don't regret protecting myself and protecting you from a life built on lies. She's working at a smaller firm now, making half what she used to make, living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Glendale. She's living with the consequences of her choices. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you'd just confronted her when you first suspected. If you'd demanded the truth instead of setting up surveillance, she would have lied, found better ways to hide it, convinced me I was being paranoid or jealous or controlling. The cameras gave me truth that couldn't be denied or explained away. Emma nodded, twirling pasta around her fork while thinking. I understand why you did it. I even respect it in a way. But it changed you, Dad. You're different now, harder. She was right. The man who'd installed those cameras was different from the man sitting in this restaurant. Colder, more calculating, less trusting. The evidence that had protected me in court had also protected me from feeling too much, caring too deeply, trusting too easily. People change when they discover who they really married, I said, or when they discover who they really are. That night, I drove back to the house that was now entirely mine, parking in a driveway that no longer felt shared. The hidden cameras were still in place, still recording, still sending motion alerts to my phone out of habit more than necessity. I'd meant to remove them after the divorce was finalized, but somehow never got around to it. Now they captured a different kind of life. Me coming home from work to an empty house. Me eating dinner alone at a kitchen table that once hosted family conversations. Me falling asleep in a bedroom where only one side of the bed showed signs of use. The cameras had given me everything I'd wanted. Truth, evidence, victory in court, custody of my daughter's respect if not her physical presence. But they'd also taken something I hadn't expected to lose. The ability to trust, to love without reservation, to believe that people were who they claimed to be. I sat in my office that night, reviewing the day's footage on my laptop. Empty rooms, motion triggered by shadows and settling house noises. The cameras kept recording because that's what cameras do, but there was nothing left worth documenting. Just a man living alone in a house full of surveillance equipment, protected from betrayal by the simple fact that there was no one left to betray him. My phone buzzed with a motion alert from the front door camera. Someone approaching the house at nearly midnight. I switched to the live feed, expecting to see a delivery driver, or maybe a neighbor's cat. Instead I saw Jessica. She stood on the porch for several minutes, not knocking, not ringing the doorbell, just staring at the door of the house she'd once called home. In the camera's night vision she looked ghostly, translucent, like a memory that refused to fade. Finally she turned and walked back to her car, driving away from a life she'd destroyed with choices she could never undo. The camera captured her departure, adding it to the thousands of hours of footage that documented the rise and fall of our marriage. I closed the laptop and went to bed in a house that was perfectly secure, completely surveilled and utterly empty. The cameras would keep recording, documenting a life where nothing interesting ever happened again, which was exactly what I'd wanted. Or so I told myself as I fell asleep to the sound of motion alerts from rooms where only shadows moved, in a house where the only secrets left were the ones I kept from myself. 3 years after the divorce was finalized, I received a phone call that changed everything. The caller ID showed an unknown number, and I almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers usually meant telemarketers or debt collectors, and I had no interest in either. But something made me pick up on the fourth ring. "Is this Marcus Chen?" The voice was young, professional, cautious. "Yes, who's asking?" "My name is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Los Angeles Police Department. I'm calling about your ex-wife Jessica Chen. She's been reported missing." The words hit me like ice water. I set down my coffee mug with trembling hands, staring out my office window at the perfectly manicured lawn I paid someone else to maintain. "Missing? What do you mean missing?" "She failed to show up for work 3 days ago, hasn't answered her phone, and her landlord found her apartment door unlocked with her purse and keys inside. No signs of struggle, but also no indication of where she might have gone." My mind raced through possibilities. Jessica working late, Jessica traveling unexpectedly, Jessica simply forgetting to lock her door, but the woman I'd been married to for 15 years was nothing if not careful about security. She triple-checked locks and always carried her keys. When was she last seen? Sunday evening. A neighbor saw her bringing in groceries around 6 p.m. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. She just vanished sometime between then and Monday morning. Detective Martinez asked the standard questions. Did I know about any threats against Jessica? Had she mentioned feeling unsafe? Were there men in her life who might pose a danger? I answered honestly, explaining that we'd had minimal contact since the divorce, that our conversations were limited to logistics about Emma's occasional visits. "I have to ask this directly, Mr. Chen. Where were you between Sunday evening and Monday morning?" "At home. I can provide security footage if you need it." Security footage. I explained about the cameras, the comprehensive surveillance system I'd installed during the marriage and never removed. Detective Martinez took notes, her tone becoming more interested as I described the setup. "We'd like to review that footage as part of our investigation. Would you be willing to provide access?" "Of course, but why would my security system matter? Jessica and I live in different cities now. Because missing persons cases often involve people familiar with the victim's routines. Ex-husbands, former lovers, workplace conflicts. We need to eliminate possibilities." After the call ended, I sat in my office staring at the phone, trying to process what I'd heard. Jessica was missing. The woman who'd destroyed our marriage, who'd lied to me for months, who'd brought strangers into our bedroom, had simply vanished from her new life like smoke. Part of me felt nothing. Jessica had made her choices, created her own reality, and now she was dealing with whatever consequences that reality contained. She'd divorced herself from my concern the moment she decided our marriage was disposable. But another part of me, a part I'd thought was dead, felt something that might have been worry. Or guilt. Or the ghost of love that refuses to disappear even after betrayal burns everything else to ash. The police arrived the next morning to collect copies of my security footage. Detective Martinez was younger than she'd sounded on the phone, maybe 35, with tired eyes and the kind of professional efficiency that comes from handling too many cases like this. Impressive setup, she said, reviewing the camera system. Most people don't have this level of home security. Most people don't discover their spouses are having affairs in their own houses. She made a note in her pad. Right, the divorce case. I reviewed the court records, quite a bit of documentation. I believe in being thorough. This level of surveillance suggests some pretty serious trust issues. This level of surveillance uncovered some pretty serious betrayals. Detective Martinez spent 2 hours reviewing footage from the weekend Jessica disappeared. My cameras showed exactly what I'd told her. Me arriving home Friday evening, staying in all weekend, working in my office, ordering takeout, living the quiet, isolated life I'd built for myself. "You live alone?" she asked. "Yes. No girlfriend, no social visitors. No, that seems lonely." "It seems honest." She closed her laptop and gathered her files. "We'll need you to remain available for questions as the investigation continues." "And Mr. Chen? I know this situation is complicated given your history, but if you think of anything that might help us find your ex-wife, please call immediately." After she left, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I called Emma. "Dad? What's wrong?" Her voice carried immediate concern. I rarely called unless something was important. "Your mother is missing." Silence stretched across the phone line. Emma was in her 3rd year at her tech job in San Francisco, building the kind of successful career Jessica had once had. She'd maintained minimal contact with her mother since the divorce, but I knew she still cared. "Missing how?" I explained what Detective Martinez had told me, watching my security monitors while we talked. 3 years of recording empty rooms, documenting a life where nothing unexpected ever happened. "Have you heard from her recently?" I asked. "She texted me last week. Something about maybe visiting San Francisco for work. Nothing specific." "Did she mention anyone new in her life? Anyone who might be concerned about her?" "Dad, we barely talk. She knows I don't trust her anymore, and I know she feels guilty about destroying our family. Our conversations are pretty surface level." That evening, I found myself reviewing old camera footage from before the divorce, not the affair evidence I'd used in court, but the ordinary moments I'd recorded without thinking about their significance. Jessica cooking dinner in our kitchen, reading on the couch, getting ready for work. A woman living her life, unaware that every movement was being documented by hidden cameras. Watching those recordings now, I tried to understand what I'd missed. What signs of unhappiness or desperation, or recklessness might have predicted that she'd eventually vanish from her new life entirely. But the woman in the footage looked normal, content even. She looked like someone building a future, not someone planning to disappear from it. Detective Martinez called again 3 days later. "We found her car." "Where?" "Parking garage at LAX. Been there since Sunday night. Security footage shows her arriving alone around 9 p.m., taking a ticket, parking on level 3. After that, nothing. Nothing. She didn't board any flights under her name. Didn't use her credit cards for tickets, just parked her car and vanished." The implications settled over me like a weight. Jessica hadn't disappeared because of an accident or a crime committed against her. She'd driven to the airport and disappeared intentionally, planning her exit carefully enough to avoid leaving digital trails. "People don't just vanish," I said. "Actually, they do. More often than you'd think. Usually because they're running from debt, legal trouble or relationships they can't handle anymore." Jessica wasn't in legal trouble. What about debt, relationship problems? I thought about Jessica's reduced salary after the divorce, her smaller apartment, her damaged reputation in the marketing industry. The affair had cost her professionally as well as personally, and recovery had been slow. She was struggling financially, I admitted. The divorce settlement wasn't generous. And relationships? I don't know about recent relationships. We didn't discuss her personal life. Detective Martinez made more notes. Mr. Chen, I need to ask this directly. Do you think your ex-wife might have harmed herself? The question hung in the air like smoke. I tried to picture Jessica making that choice, ending her life rather than continuing to deal with the consequences of her decisions. The woman I'd married wouldn't have given up, but the woman who'd had affairs was someone I'd never really known. I don't know, I said honestly. I thought I knew her for 15 years, and I was completely wrong about who she was. The investigation continued for 2 more weeks before Detective Martinez called with what she described as a development. We found evidence that your ex-wife withdrew a significant amount of cash from multiple ATMs in the weeks before she disappeared. $20,000 over 10 days, always in small amounts, always from different locations. $20,000, from where? Credit card advances mostly. She maxed out every card she had access to. $20,000 in cash, suggested planning, preparation for a life without digital footprints or paper trails. Jessica hadn't vanished impulsively. She'd been preparing her exit for weeks, maybe months. There's something else, Detective Martinez continued. We tracked down Dr. Ryan Blackwood. The name hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't heard it spoken aloud since the divorce proceedings, hadn't thought about Jessica's former lover in years. What about him? He's been receiving threatening messages for the past 6 months, anonymous emails, untraceable phone calls, someone blaming him for ruining their life. You think Jessica was threatening him? We think someone was, and the timeline matches your ex-wife's increasing financial stress and social isolation. The pieces began forming a picture I didn't want to see. Jessica struggling in her new life, watching Ryan Blackwood continue his successful medical practice while she dealt with reduced income and damaged reputation. Her anger growing into obsession, obsession growing into threats, threats escalating until she felt she had no choice but to disappear entirely. Did Blackwood report these threats? Not officially. He mentioned them to colleagues, changed his phone number, increased security at his office, but he never filed a police report. Why not? Probably because he didn't want to draw attention to the affair that cost him his marriage. Even now he's reluctant to discuss details. That afternoon, I did something I'd sworn I'd never do. I called Ryan Blackwood's office. Dr. Blackwood is with a patient, his receptionist said. Can I take a message? Tell him Marcus Chen called, he'll know what it's about. Blackwood called back within an hour, his voice tight with anxiety. What do you want? I want to know what Jessica said to you in those threatening messages. I'm not discussing this with you. She's missing, doctor. The police think she might have harmed herself. If you know something that could help find her, you have a moral obligation to share it. Silence stretched across the line. Finally Blackwood spoke. She blamed me for destroying her life, said I seduced her, used her, then abandoned her when things got complicated. Did you? We were adults. We made choices. That's not what I asked. Another pause. She was vulnerable, unhappy in her marriage, looking for connection, looking for someone who understood her. And you provided that understanding in hotel rooms while her husband was traveling for work. She told me you were distant, that your marriage was already over. Convenient justification. Look, I regret what happened. I regret the pain it caused everyone, including Jessica, but I didn't force her into anything. What did the threatening messages say specifically? That I'd ruined her life, that she'd lost her family, her career, her reputation because of me, that she was going to make sure I paid for what I'd done. Did she specify how? She talked about exposing me professionally, sending evidence of our affair to my patients, my colleagues. She said she had recordings of our conversations, photos I'd sent her, things that would destroy my practice. The word recordings sent ice through my veins. What kind of recordings? I don't know. I assumed she was bluffing, but the threats were specific enough to be concerning. After ending the call, I sat in my office staring at the security monitors that showed empty rooms throughout my house. For 3 years I'd lived surrounded by surveillance equipment, documenting a life where nothing interesting ever happened. But Jessica had been documenting something else entirely, evidence against the man who'd helped destroy our marriage. The irony was suffocating. I'd used hidden cameras to gather evidence against Jessica. Now she'd apparently used similar methods to gather evidence against Ryan Blackwood. The technology that had protected me in divorce court had become her weapon for revenge against the man who'd abandoned her. But if Jessica had damaging evidence against Blackwood, where was it now? Had she taken it with her when she disappeared? hidden it somewhere as insurance, or was she planning to use it in ways that required her to vanish first? Detective Martinez answered on the first ring. When I called with this new information, Dr. Blackwood mentioned recordings. I told her, Jessica apparently had evidence of their affair that she was threatening to make public. What kind of evidence? He wasn't specific, but if she recorded their conversations or photographed private communications, she could have destroyed his medical practice. And now she's gone along with whatever evidence she gathered. Unless she arranged for it to be released after her disappearance. The implications hung between us, Jessica vanishing not to escape her problems, but to create maximum impact for her revenge, disappearing in a way that would generate police investigation, media attention, public scrutiny of everyone connected to her life. We need to talk to Dr. Blackwood again, Detective Martinez said, and we need to search your ex-wife's apartment more thoroughly. The search of Jessica's apartment revealed what investigators had missed during their initial sweep. Hidden behind false panels and inside sealed containers were dozens of recording devices, printed emails, photographs, and financial records. Jessica had been documenting everything, building a comprehensive case against Ryan Blackwood that went far beyond their personal affair. She'd recorded conversations where he discussed manipulating patient records for insurance fraud. She'd photographed prescription pads he'd given her to sell medications illegally. She'd documented a systematic pattern of medical and financial crimes that stretched back years before their affair began. This isn't just about revenge for a broken relationship, Detective Martinez explained during a briefing at the police station. Your ex-wife stumbled onto evidence of serious criminal activity. Dr. Blackwood wasn't just an unfaithful lover. He was using his medical practice as a front for prescription drug trafficking. The scope of Jessica's evidence was staggering. She'd spent months gathering proof of Blackwood's crimes, using their affair as cover to access his office, his files, his private communications. What had started as a romantic relationship had become an elaborate undercover investigation. Did she plan this from the beginning? I asked. We don't think so. The evidence suggests she discovered his criminal activity during their affair and decided to document it. Maybe for protection, maybe for leverage, maybe for revenge. But why disappear instead of going to the police? Because she was complicit in some of the crimes, the prescription medications, the insurance fraud. She'd implicated herself while gathering evidence against him. 2 days later, the story broke across every major news outlet in Los Angeles. Dr. Ryan Blackwood, prominent cardiologist at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, arrested on charges of prescription drug trafficking, insurance fraud, and patient endangerment. The investigation revealed a network of illegal activity that had operated for years within one of the city's most prestigious hospitals. Jessica's disappearance suddenly made sense. She'd gathered evidence that would destroy Blackwood, but also implicate herself. Rather than face prosecution, she'd chosen to vanish, leaving behind enough documentation to ensure Blackwood's arrest while protecting herself from legal consequences. She played it perfectly, Detective Martinez said during our final meeting. Blackwood goes to prison, his medical license is revoked, his criminal network is exposed, and Jessica disappears with enough cash to start a new life somewhere else. Will you keep looking for her? The case will remain open, but realistically she's gone. $20,000 in cash, a 3-week head start and no electronic trail. People disappear successfully all the time when they plan it this carefully. That evening I received a call from Emma. Dad, did you see the news about Dr. Blackwood? Yes. Do you think Mom planned this whole thing? The affair, the evidence gathering, the disappearance. I considered the question while watching my security monitors display empty rooms. For months during our marriage, I'd suspected Jessica was someone other than who she claimed to be. Now I understood just how right I'd been. I think your mother is more intelligent and more calculating than either of us ever realized. But also more criminal, maybe. Or maybe she was trying to make things right in the only way she could. 6 months later I received a postcard with no return address, postmarked from a city I'd never visited. The image showed a beach at sunset, palm trees swaying in ocean breeze. On the back, written in handwriting I recognized after 15 years of marriage, were 4 words: I am truly sorry. No signature, no contact information, no indication of where Jessica had gone or what name she was using now. Just an acknowledgement of regret from someone who destroyed our family, gathered evidence against a criminal, and vanished into a life I'd never be part of. I kept the postcard in my office desk drawer, next to the divorce papers and the security camera manuals, evidence of a marriage that had ended in betrayal, revenge and disappearance. Proof that the woman I'd thought I knew had been a stranger all along, capable of deception and calculation that went far beyond anything I'd imagined. The cameras in my house continued recording empty rooms, documenting a life where nothing unexpected ever happened, which was exactly what I wanted now that I understood how dangerous unexpected things could be. But sometimes, late at night, I found myself wondering about that beach in the postcard, whether Jessica was watching sunsets there, whether she'd found peace in her new identity, whether she ever thought about the family she'd abandoned and the husband who'd documented her destruction. The cameras couldn't answer those questions. They could only record what was, not what might have been or what could still be. And in the end, that was enough. Truth was enough, even when it revealed that the people we love are capable of becoming strangers who disappear into lives we'll never understand. The motion alerts kept coming, marking time in a house where only one person lived, surrounded by surveillance equipment that protected against betrayals that would never come again. Because the only person left to betray was myself, and I'd already done that the day I chose cameras over conversation, evidence over trust, revenge over forgiveness. The beach in the postcard remained a mystery, like everything else about the woman who'd once shared my name and my bed and my dreams of the future. But mysteries were safer than trust, and surveillance was more reliable than love, and empty rooms were more honest than marriages built on lies. The cameras kept recording, and I kept watching, and somewhere a woman named Jessica Chen had become someone else entirely, living a life I'd never see through any surveillance system I could ever build. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.